"The only beauty in the world is man," said Maldragon. He savored the words as he spoke them, looking down through slatted windows on streets bustling with color. The great white ziggurat of the divine hall of man towered above the rest of Caldria, nearly as tall as the grand citadel itself, and Maldragon could see clearly across the entire city. His pale yellow eyes scanned the streets, finally coming to rest over the lush island of Callus Waith. The prominent island jutted above the horizon in the distance, rising pristine on white limestone cliffs above the darkening waters of Lake Nemain. In the afternoon light, he could make out the glittering walls of Durin's sky, the imperial palace perched high atop the craggy cliff face. His eyes narrowed as he studied the distant island, the corners of his mouth becoming a scowl. On this one truth rests all our beliefs. It is the first truth to a pure and noble existence. Nature is empty without man, for man gives it life, distinction, awareness. What is a mountain with no one to see it? But we cannot forget that this truth exists with an undeniable parallel, that there is nothing truly ugly in the world but the weakness of men. The words sounded like poetry as Maldragon spoke, his voice soft and rich. The Maul strode from the window towards a man kneeling in the center of a high circular room. A column of white light poured down from a dome high above, reflecting off tall white pillars. Maldragon circled the man with deliberate slowness, his strides measured as he paced the perimeter. He was careful to remain just outside the circle of light. The man in the center of the room sat doubled over on his hands and knees, a tattered brown robe hanging loosely from one shoulder. The folds of the dirty white kilpie were just visible beneath. He was panting heavily, his back arcing in spasms as he fought to regain his breath. A stream of blood ran from a livid gash in his temple and fell pattering to the polished marble. The sound echoed through the chamber. He spat loudly and sat back on his haunches. His round face, wide-set eyes, and light olive skin hinted at some vaguely Western heritage, and a line of pale skin across his forehead suggested the tan line of a Clamale. He dropped his hands by his side and gazed upwards to the skylight far above. There was no fear in his brown eyes, only exhaustion. Closing his eyes, he began reciting mantras to himself, his lips barely moving as he spoke. His voice was nearly inaudible in the stillness. "I unbind the unknown and make the dark places light, and the emptiness whole. I follow where I fear to go, and am afraid no longer." Maldragon laughed scornfully. That is what I despise about you most, druid," he said, spitting the last word. He stopped in front of the man and looked down, studying him. "If I hadn't seen for myself the craven, empty lives you heretics lead, I might have taken those words for true courage." His yellow eyes flashed dangerously. "Man cannot wrong another man. Not really. It isn't possible. Men are sovereigns unto themselves, and the only wrongs they receive are those they permit themselves to receive. Men are kings, and no king would suffer the abuse of a peasant, so you see, I have not wronged you by bringing you here. We each fight with the strength that is given us, that is all. The fight itself is not wrong. When men fail to see their own strength, and when they cease their struggle, then they do wrong, not to others, but to themselves. And you would encourage this, a passionless, gliding mediocrity that inspires no one to lift themselves up and strive for more. You are satisfied that I am put here before you, stripped and enfeebled at your mercy. But my joy does not depend upon my circumstances, nor am I tied to this body." "You speak with such bravado," Maldragon continued, throwing his arms wide, The loose sleeves of his robe fell back to reveal willowy forearms and rope-like veins that rippled as he clenched his fists. "You sound like a true son of Decidar, but I shall make you wish you weren't tied to this body," he said, stepping into the circle of light. His black hair fell in shining rivers down his shoulders, framing a gaunt face with thin, purple lips and high cheekbones. His narrow yellow eyes peered out of sunken sockets ringed by the dark circles of many sleepless nights. The Maul cupped the druid's chin with his hand and wrenched his face upwards. "You are a coward. You are lost without your wretched little gods. Your twisted devotion is a testament to the blindness which infects all your kind," he said, releasing the man's chin roughly. The druid remained looking up at him. "Do not think," he said hoarsely, "that your beliefs are the whole truth, or even the only truth in this world, Maldragon. The only truth is a journey we are born into, without perspective or motive. What are we compared to this?" "What truths you speak, Elder Kester," Maldragon spat. "And what will you leave behind with all your humility? Your modesty writes no records. What mark have you left in this world to show that you were ever here at all, that you were any better than the mindless beasts of the forests?" "I hope to leave nothing behind," Kester said. "I hope to leave this world as unblemished as when I entered. I have faith that my spirit will return to Amenweir and be reunited with the earth that made my flesh. This is my faith." "Faith?" Maldragon sneered. "Faith is for those with no proof of their beliefs. The sons of Decidar need no such faith. Only a tyrant would govern the faithless." Maldragon sniffed, straightening. He regarded the druid for a moment. "Your fate is fitting, then," he said. "You claim that I am faithless, yet it is you who have no faith. No faith in yourself, for you do not realize your own divinity, your own strength. Man is the only power in this world, the only one. Man and the iron of his will," Maldragon said, shaking his bony fist in the druid's face. "You would rely on gods and on emperors, but I tell you it is man who is the true god. Man. Man alone stands among the beasts of this world and is aware, and with his might he defines the borders of his kingdom, creating beauty where once there was only a barren wasteland." "Rasmus!" Maldragon called, without taking his eyes off Kester. A small man who had been standing in the shadows stepped forward. He was plainly dressed and wore an open, faded red vest in the style of a deacon. He gave them all a questioning look, and Maldragon noted the eager, almost hopeful glint in his downturned, hooded eyes. His left eye was clouded by cataracts, and it glistened with a watery sheen. Greasy strands of graying hair hung from his balding head, and his leathery skin was pocked by old scars. He blinked expectantly. "You see, it is man who crafts his world and governs it," Maldragon resumed. "Decidar taught us this, and gave us the imperative to make this planet into our own domain, to sculpt it as gods do from the lifeless clay, and bring beauty into existence. Beauty, Elder Kestor, is the highest principle of man. Only man can understand beauty, so he must perfect it. Beauty is morality, and those who cannot see it must be immoral." "Beauty is tyranny," Kester replied meekly, too weak to lift up his head any more. "What is beauty when it must conform to your will?" "Blasphemer!" Maldragon hissed through clenched teeth. "Yet you will earn redemption by this task I set before you." "I was not born to be compelled," Elder Druid recited, "by you or anyone else." "All men were born to be compelled, Elder," Maldragon said. "Every man might be a god, but those gods would rain destruction and chaos down upon their little lands without guidance." "And it is your guidance they require?" Elder Kester asked with as much humor as he could muster. "You presume to doubt, Druid, but at least my guidance is real. I live and breathe in this world, not some ethereal plane of exile. He folded his arms patiently. All your mantras and directives, they must make it so easy for you not to think. Your faith is a crux, a disease that cripples the true glorious nature of man. It encourages weakness, and this is the true evil of the world. I will spread truth and purge that evil, and show the virtue and goodness in man's divinity. And you will help me. Kester shook his head sadly. What perversity of fate has led us to this path? The only good is knowledge, he said, and the only evil is ignorance. Your mantras are truly endless, Maldragon said, a grim smile tightening his purple lips. But we shall see. There is only one truth, and I shall soon reveal it. He turned to Rasmus, who'd been standing patiently by his side. This heretic does not yet understand the salvation that waits with our prophet Decidar. He still looks to his banished pantheon for absolution. The Maul stepped backwards into the shadows. Instruct him. Rasmus nodded and walked to the man, restraining his arms tightly behind his back with a metal clasp. He produced a small silver rod, ornately etched, with pointed forks at both ends. Kestor did not resist as Rasmus tilted back his head and tied the rod into place with one of the pointed ends projecting into his chest, the other jabbing upwards into the soft flesh beneath his chin. When he had finished securing the prongs with a leather strap about Kestor's neck, Rasmus stepped back and surveyed his work. Both ends of the device were firmly held, their fine points already piercing the druid's skin as he struggled in this painful position. Maldragon watched silently as Rasmus moved around the druid, pulling Kestor's hair out of his face and straightening his robe. Rasmus pulled a white cloth from his breast pocket and gently dabbed at the spittle around the druid's mouth. He carefully wiped around the points of the fork where the blood was beginning to trickle, murmuring quietly all the while. Maldragon could not hear what he was saying, but he watched as Rasmus's fat, childlike hands fussed over the druid. Thank you, Rasmus, Maldragon said, inspecting the gasping druid. Rasmus started, as if he were surprised to find himself not alone with the bound man. He looked up at Maldragon, bags drooping beneath his watery eyes. He is ready to receive your benediction, highest one, Rasmus said, his voice thin and faltering. Maldragon nodded, and Rasmus retreated a few paces, stepping outside the ring of light. This is the truth of Decidar, Maldragon said, flicking the pronged forks. Do you know why? Kestor began to speak, but choked on the words as the prongs dug into his chin, causing the blood to flow faster. He squeezed his eyes tight in a rictus of pain, his breath coming in short, snorting bursts through his nostrils. Ah, I think you see now. You will find it lends a certain, economy to your speech. The Maul smiled, but there was no warmth in his eyes. Be wise about your words, druid, and you may find this conversation short, he said, his ashen face lurid in the cold light. I have a message for you to deliver.